Hello, decentralized community across the globe. Welcome to this month's webinar. On behalf of the University of Nicosia, I would like to thank you all for being here with us. And of course, our speaker for today, Ric Spagni, as well as the organizer behind and the driving force behind this webinar, Robin, who is also the Cape Town chapter leader for Decentralized. So enjoy the talk for today, and I will pass the floor now to Robin to introduce Ric to us. Robin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sula. Welcome everyone to this exciting talk by Ric Spagni. Most of you probably know him as Fluffy Pony on Twitter. Thanks to University of Nicosia's Institute for the Future for championing blockchain and education across our developing African continent, and particularly to Valentinos and Sula of UNIC for their time and experience in driving this decentralized Cape Town chapter. The topic today is centralized interfaces are cool and decentralized interfaces suck. How are we going to get adoption? Ric has the floor for half an hour, and we have half an hour for Q&A. I must just note that this politically incorrect title, sucks, was Ric and my idea, not the university's. You might have noticed there was a much more palatable title in the marketing material. Anyway, back to Ric. Ric is an awesome bloke. He entered the crypto industry in 2011, which is about 10 years ago, a real character. He's a top 100 most influential person in crypto in 2020. He's partnered with several high-profile Silicon Valley VCs and crypto OGs. He's co-founded Monero, Tari, Globee multicurrency payment processor. He lives in the beautiful coastal town of Plettenberg Bay in South Africa. Ric is an industry champion for privacy. He's a pretty crazy dude. He has a passion for playing with Lego, as does my grandson, and building and flying drones. And he certainly caused a stir with his wristwatches. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can Google Fluffy Pony and Rolex. And there's lots of interesting stories around that to entertain you. Anyway, without further ado, over to Ric for his views on centralized payment experiences are amazing. Crypto user experience sucks. How are we going to get adoption? Go, Ric.
Cool. Sorry. Computer crashed on me. Huh. Great. So thanks everyone for having me. I'm basically going to spend the next 30 minutes complaining. So I hope you're up for that. But what I'm going to talk about is basically where we've gone wrong, especially with regards to user experiences, and what we can do better. So for those that don't know me, I'm Ric Spagni. I'm one of the maintainers on the Monero core protocol software. I'm also a co-founder at Tari Labs. And so, maybe to sort of start at the beginning, let's take a look at how we got here, how we got to where we are today from a user experience perspective, what the challenges are, and then what we can do to fix it. So let's start with how did we get here? The reality is that most cryptocurrency experiences are built by engineers. That's not an insulting thing. I'm an engineer, and you know how it is when you're an engineer. You're mostly focused on your user experience, and you try not to think about the users, which again is just natural. When we dog food our products, and by dog food I mean when we use them ourselves, we work knowing the limitations. So what that means is, if you write a program and the program expects you to punch a number in, then as an engineer, when you're testing it, you know the limitations. You're going to put a number in there. You're not going to try put in a comma instead of a full stop for a decimal point. You're not going to do something weird like, type the number out as text. You know exactly what the limitations of the software are. The unfortunate reality is that very few projects in the space are product driven. Everything's tech driven. And this is especially highlighted or especially true if you go onto, you go and look at a lot of the projects that Silicon Valley VCs are throwing money at. They throw money at projects based on tech. It's look at this new cryptography, look at this newfangled math. There's very little focus on look at this wonderful user experience. And because the open source projects in the space tend to follow the path that's set by centralized projects that have raised money, you end up with a lot of the same. In fact, with open source projects, it tends to be a little bit worse, not better.
Hello, sorry, we lost Rick there. So let's see what
Cool. Can you hear me now?
Okay, there he is.
There we go. Awesome. All right. So as I was saying, so this is the Monero wallet. I'm going to go through a couple of wallets that I have gotten screenshots for. It's important to know that I own and operate Monero. So this is, I just start off with let's self-critique. Let's take a look at something that I've spent a lot of time and energy building, and with some others. And also, we did actually work with the designer to try and get like a reasonable user experience. And there's some good things. You can save someone as a contact, and you can send it or pick them up again as a contact when you send funds to them in the future. That's great. There's this weird payment ID thing, which Monero has largely walked away from or stepped back from. Then there's things like priority. What does that mean to someone? Like, priority, high, low? I mean, it's confusing. Okay, so already out the gate, with a wallet that is kind of user experience focused, we already start to see things that are confusing to normies. Okay, cool. So now I've sent my Monero. My Monero is on its way. That's great. I see the total. The 2 is like this 96 character long address, which is just horrendous. Like, what does that mean? To any normal person, they look at that and they're just like, what have I gotten myself into? It's frightening. Okay, and then heaven forbid there's an error. Spendable balance too low. Again, what does that mean? All of these things to a normal user is extremely, extremely confusing to the point of being frightening. Now, we have this this benefit that people have overcome a lot of the challenges with regards to user experience because they want to make money and things like that. But the reality is that these poor experiences should not exist in the first place. Let's take a look at some others. Okay, this is the Stellar Lumens wallet. Okay, kind of interesting. They've built a chat tool into the wallet. Now, that's nice if you want to get suckered into the chat tool. If you don't like the chat tool, then you end up with a bit of an issue because, yeah, you can send payments from within this chat tool, but it's not that easy if you use something else, like if you use, Slack or IRC or Discord. Eclair, a Lightning wallet, again, lovely, really focused on creating a great user experience, but already there's confusion because like there's this payment request which has this long string in, users have no clue like what that means. There's this on-chain, off-chain stuff. There's like 3 different amounts there in sats that, like, again, the user has no clue what that's supposed to mean. Once the payment is sent, again, we just dump all the information on the user. You want to see the full raw payment request? Well, here it is in all its glory. You want to see the payment hash? Well, there it is too. Again, super confusing to a user. And then lastly, channel management, which again is an integral part of the Lightning Network, leads to just this added complexity of like, where are my open channels, where are my closed channels. It's, really, honestly, Eclair does a great job in trying to manage this, but it is confusing to users. Another wallet is Blue Wallet. This is again a Bitcoin/Lightning wallet. They've done the best that they can here, but still, it's not great. They've abstracted as much as possible away, but to a lot of users, this is just frightening. And if you compare this to like, where we were, and frankly, a lot of these user experiences still exist. And don't get me wrong, I'm a big Electrum fan. I use Electrum all the time. It still looks like this. This is like from version 2.6.4. We're currently on version 4 point something. It hasn't really changed much. They've added Lightning support, but the user experience is largely the same. We've come a long way though from these user experiences, and there are better user experiences that are available. But frankly, like, not much has changed from the original Bitcoin GUI, and whilst we've abstracted some stuff away, it's just not 100%. Now, the challenge that we face here is we're not going to be able to onboard the next billion people into crypto with these user experiences. Certainly not with these sort of like old school user experiences, but frankly not with many of the user experiences that we have right now. And I think if we think about the baseline, if we think about the comparison, centralized user experiences are amazing. I mean, the Apple Pay user experience is masterful. And the sort of double click on the side button and then do the Face ID, or the original one where you authorize it with your fingerprint, things like that. Tap and pay, just that entire abstraction away from like the complexities of making a payment is masterful. And more than that, the way that they've rolled payments into things like iMessage is, again, just lovely. It's a refreshing, wonderful user experience. How do we get these user experiences while still retaining the qualities of decentralization? And I think that's really where the challenge lies, because it's very easy. It's almost trivially easy to go, well, decentralization is hard, and we just want the thing to work really well, and we're focused on the tech. We're in it for the tech, and so we're just going to make sure that the tech works really well. And well, people must just figure out the user experience. And I've been on that side of the argument. I've made that argument. Tech is hard, and if people need to figure out how to use command line interfaces, well, that's just not my problem. The reality, though, is those command line experiences or those poor experiences are just not great when it comes to onboarding more users, especially the next billion users. And if you think about large organizations who are product focused, organizations like Amazon, Facebook, and Apple, they spend an inordinate amount of time and money making sure that the user experience is amazing. So how do we get there from here? How can we fix the problems that we've created? Well, there are a number of observations that I've made over the past few years. The first thing is we need to become more product focused. And that's not to say that we should step away from the tech, or like the tech is not important. But when you're product focused, then you start to think about the real world value, the real world impact that your product can have. And I think that is a critical component that's missing. Try dog fooding with your non-crypto friends. When it comes to like, hey, I've built this cool thing, or here's this thing to play with, try actually sitting down with somebody that you're friendly with, family member, a buddy, a colleague, whatever, who's not in crypto, and get them to use it. And you will see how frightening it is. That level of user testing seems to be sorely lacking. And again, I'm painting everyone with the same brush here. I'm sure that there are some who are trying to do this, and some of them are succeeding. The new blockchain.com wallet is apparently lovely, but super centralized, so it might as well just be a bank account. But still, having that level of user testing, and we can do that on a very small scale, is invaluable. Then, instead of trying to design the user interface out the gate, if you're resource constrained, why not try make it work on the command line first? Just make it work in the plainest possible way, command line only. And then when you have it working, then you can go like, hey, we have the tech. We've ticked the box for the tech. And now we can focus on the user experience. I think that's a super critical path that seems to be lacking. There's a lot of like, oh, well, look at our lovely user interface, but we have no idea how we're going to make it work in a decentralized way. Another thing is to abstract complexity away from the user. And as a contributor to multiple Lightning projects, I can tell you that Lightning and Mimblewimble and several other technologies face this difficulty with abstraction, because a lot of them require interactivity. A lot of them require, all sorts of complexity with channels, speaking particularly of Lightning. And that can really make things difficult for a user if they're exposed to that. Users should really only see one balance. They shouldn't see 17 different balances, because some of it's on-chain, some of it's off-chain. Monero has this problem too, where when you receive funds, they're not immediately spendable. So now you have like your available balance and your not yet available balance. It's confusing to users. So being able to sort of step back from that, abstract that information from the user, and give them just what they need, not what they think they need, but what they actually need. Same goes for the complexity of error messages. Yes, there might be an underlying reason why a particular amount is not available to spend right now, but can we provide that information in a way that is a lot easier for a user to understand? Or are we just going to take like the raw error message that we get from the command line tool and just pump it out to the user, and the user's left to figure it out? And frankly, this happens more than you'd think. I often search for error messages and come across like GitHub issues where people have posted, oh, I'm encountering this error. And, MetaMask is a great example of this. Like some of the errors that MetaMask throws out are just like, I don't know if they're getting them straight out of Infura or whatever Ethereum backend they're plugging into, but some of the error messages are so like ridiculously unintuitive that I don't actually know how anyone uses MetaMask for more than 3 seconds. And then also give power users entirely different tools. Your ordinary users, the next billion users that we're trying to onboard, do not need power user tools. And a way to think about this, or the way that I sort of abstracted in my mind, is if you think about web-based services like Facebook and Twitter and so on, their user interfaces and their mobile apps are pretty masterfully designed. They've spent a lot of time and energy and effort making sure they're really easy to use. However, if you're a power user, not only do you have some things that are exposed in the front end, but frankly, you could go and use their API. And you can go and dig into all sorts of things that they might not expose at all, or they might not expose easily. So in a very real sense, organizations who are product focused right now already provide a different set of tools through that abstraction. And some of them do actually provide additional tools to power users. If you're a Facebook advertiser, for example, you have access to a set of tools that a normal Facebook user doesn't care about. They don't even know it exists. If you're running a Facebook group or Facebook page or whatever they call it nowadays, again, you have access to a different set of tools. Same goes for something like YouTube. If you're posting up videos and you're managing a subscriber base and you're doing live broadcasts, there are all sorts of tools that you are exposed to, but if you're just a YouTube user who's going and watching videos, you don't even know those tools exist, even if you have a YouTube account. So that level of abstraction is incredibly powerful. And it also means that maybe out the gate with a new project or with an existing project, you can focus on command line tools and then power user tools, because those are your early adopters, and then the tools that are super easy to use. So, that might be a really good path to develop against, a good critical path, rather than let's just develop this in isolation and hope that people figure out how to use it. So that's really, I didn't want to sort of go into too much detail in terms of criticizing different user interfaces, because again, I started off with a self-critique there with my Monero, and I can tell you all sorts of other issues that UX issues that Monero has faced. It is a challenging space. It is difficult, but I think the lack of product focus has really led us to a set of user experiences that we've become accustomed to, and we have a tendency, I think, to be a little bit, we almost apologize it away, like, oh yes, that's Bitcoin addresses are complex. Well, that's okay. I mean, if you need to use it, you'll figure it out. Oh, my Ethereum transaction failed 17 times because there wasn't enough gas and the gas estimator was incorrect. Oh, well, if you really want to throw money at a DeFi yield farm, you'll figure it out. And at the end of the day, that's not the way it should be. And we should and can do better, because we're not up against each other. We're up against legacy organizations and legacy tools. And frankly, the set of banking tools that is currently available worldwide is extremely mature. And for most people, like, think about how abstracted they are away from any technical complexity when it comes to their bank. They go to the shops, they tap their card, they swipe their card, they tap their phone. That's like the most complexity that they ever have to encounter when it comes to spending funds. And whilst we've created a wonderful set of self-sovereign tools, we've not really thought about how those people will migrate to them. And that's something that I really want to encourage, is just thinking about how the next billion people will onboard into this ecosystem. Where are the abstractions that we need? Where are the pain points? Sit down with non-crypto people and figure it out. Because if we continue to have like this internal set of discussions about like how wonderful one crypto wallet is versus another, it's not really the correct comparison. We should be comparing a crypto wallet against Apple Pay, against a credit card. And that's not what we're doing. So I strongly encourage people to really get back to focusing on the core user experience, to being product focused. If you want to see how we're tackling this at Tari Labs and on Tari, we do have a testnet wallet out called Tari Aurora. I encourage you to download it and play with it. You get given a little bit of testnet Tari, which is worthless and will continue to be worthless and is not an airdrop and will never be worth anything. It is on the Android and Apple app stores. It's not available on F-Droid yet. Not available on desktop, but install it on your phone, play around with it, and you'll see like what we're trying to do, or the way we think about product focus. And this is in testnet. This is not even like live mainnet stuff. So there's tons of teething issues that we've encountered over the past few months since we launched testnet. But at least it'll give you an idea of what I think is a product-focused way of development. And that's really all that I wanted to talk about today. Is, like I said, I wanted to complain a lot about user experiences, and I thank you for your time.
Thanks a million, Rick. That was fantastic. So we've got some questions from the audience here. First one is, what are the critical elements of designing for crypto?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is, designing for crypto is, I think, a very difficult thing. And I think that some of the critical elements that aren't being discussed enough are things like addresses. It's those public keys are not going to go away. They're a critical part of using a cryptocurrency, but how we abstract them away, I think, is important. And the other thing that I've seen a sort of lack of consideration given to is just showing transaction history. And again, I know that can be a complex thing, especially when it comes to interactive protocols. Things like, or even with things like Ethereum, where a transaction might fail, but you still paid for it. And being able to display that in a way that is not frightening to the user, I think, is something that probably has lacked a lot of attention in the past.
Cool. The next one is, how would you build over great tech, for example, Uniswap and MetaMask?
Yeah, so again, like Uniswap is like they've tried really hard to create a good user experience while still understanding that users might go to like a random Uniswap link and end up buying a fake currency. And so there are these big red warnings all over the place, which can get annoying, quite frankly. And I think that there's, they've tried to make it as simple as possible. And kudos to them. Uniswap have, from a usability perspective, they've done some good things. But there is still just an incredible amount of complexity because, and I'll give you a classic example of this with Uniswap. There's a default list of tokens that are available in Uniswap, but 99% of the time, those aren't the tokens that people are interested in. They want to buy yams or gherkins or pickles or whatever, the latest DeFi food scam is. And now they're like, oh, but I want to buy random food token number 7. And so then they go like, well, it's not in this list. And then there's a button to change the list. And then you get given like, these 15 different lists of tokens, and you don't actually know which one it is. And it's so, and it's so confusing to users who just want to get into the latest DeFi scam, and now they don't know how. So I think it gets frustrating, and I've sat with people and I've seen the frustration when they've tried to use Uniswap, when they've tried to get into yield farming and things like that. And it's not to say that there isn't product focus on Uniswap's side. It's just that it is, for most users, a very scary experience. I think abstraction can be done from that scary experience by building out apps where you can more tightly control the user experience. I think that sometimes on the web we're somewhat constrained to what we can do. I think you can build beautiful web experiences, don't get me wrong, but I think that there's value in building out very targeted, very specific apps for this stuff.
Yeah, it probably leads into the next one, which was like, is there an opportunity to build a sexy dashboard over the multiple channels because you don't seem to be able to get everything in one place? So it's probably a similar answer.
Yeah, so absolutely, and I think that there's there's a lot of experience for multi-currency things. So I'm a big fan of like what's being done at Exodus, which is probably my favorite multi-currency wallet at this point in time. Very easy to use. They spend an inordinate amount of time and energy trying to abstract things away from users, and it is complex, and they'll like you sit down and have a discussion with JP, and he'll be the first to tell you that it is incredibly complex. But yeah, being able to have some sort of dashboard app that covers multiple channels, I think would be incredibly useful. One thing, and just on this topic, so one of the challenges that I've faced in the past, and this is a non-crypto challenge, is the fact that I'm on multiple different instant messaging platforms. So, I've got I'm invited to this Slack, I'm on that Discord, I'm on this Telegram group, I've got like this WhatsApp, that WhatsApp. There's all these different things, and now do I really want to have 17 different apps open on my computer? So there's this lovely program called Franz, Franz, and Franz is amazing because it just has all of your chat applications, and you can have multiple instances of them and all sorts of things, and it just really bundles the web application in, so it's not even that complex. But what's nice is, for someone like me who uses multiple instant messaging apps, I now only have one application on my computer. I don't need to have 17 different ones. And I think that we're hopefully, or we should think about ways to do the same thing for crypto. Ways to have a single application that is able to give you the functionality and the power and control that you need over multiple different channels. So, and that, I think it's more of a power user tool probably. But if you build that, then you're able to suck some of the secret sauce out. Absolutely. And then build all sorts of really interesting and really useful tools for end users, for the next billion users.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Rick. And then Tate, hopefully I pronounced your name correctly. There's a rise in DeFi and NFTs. How do we make it easy for non-crypto people, easy to view and understand how to use DeFi and NFTs from the wallets?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And And the challenge that I think exists there is even if you just focused on Ethereum, even if you ignored, Binance Smart Chain and like all the projects that are trying to, that do have DeFi things built on top of them, even if you just focused on Ethereum, there is this mishmash of standards and of implementations that makes that super difficult. So you could build an application and you could say, well, this is now a DeFi app, and you install this DeFi app and you can then farm pickles and you can farm yams and you can do a couple of other things, but then tomorrow there's a new thing that comes out and now you need to add support to it. And so I've seen with a lot of applications, and maybe not so much applications, but even things like Zappify that is trying to provide a dashboard for all of your Ethereum data. So Zappify tries to provide like this single portfolio view, where you just connect your MetaMask to it, and then it's like, oh, okay, you've got this much locked up in this farm, and you've got this much locked up staking there, and you're holding this and holding that and holding the other. And they are struggling to keep up with all of the new things that are being released. And that is a centralized organization that has got money to do so. Now, you take some of the other things that are maybe a little bit more abstracted away and are like more open, like sort of take a more open source approach. So something like Rotkey, which is again an Ethereum and Bitcoin portfolio tracker, but it's an actual open source application. And Rotkey, there again, they struggle to be able to track this stuff because they don't have tons of funding to like go and add, every farm that opens up every other day. Like they sort of expect their audience of open source contributors to go and add support for that. And that is it's a legitimate challenge. It's a genuine challenge, and not one that I think is easily accomplished. I do think that possibly where we'll end up with, or what we'll end up with in the future, is some way for new products and services to be able to push into some sort of centralized directory and say, hey, we've just launched this new product. It's an NFT. It has the following attributes. Or it's a yield farm, it has the following attributes, and then that directory you might be able to build something on that. But at the moment, it's very much a pull, where like if you're building any sort of DeFi directory or NFT directory, you're going out and you're checking OpenSea and Rarible, and you're trying to figure out like where the tendrils are, and then you're trying to pull them in, and that is legitimately difficult at the moment because there isn't a single source of truth. And even when if you do try and build that single source of truth, the other challenge you face is moderation. Because if it's open and anyone can push into it, that's not to say that people will push weird things into it, but they might push outright scams into it. And now, how do you moderate the scams from the not scams? Or how do you provide some sort of interesting view of like what's actually getting people's attention, and not just some vanity metric like what has liquidity locked up, because that's easy to game.
Good, that sounds fantastic. Tate, thank you very much for that question. Okay, the next one is, will we ever be able to compete with WhatsApp and Facebook Pay?
Yeah, that is a tough question. I hope so. I'm extremely optimistic on the future from a user experience perspective. I think that we have the tools and we have the functionality and we have the abilities within the broader ecosystem to build really amazing products. And frankly, I am seeing some good work come out of companies like Exodus and Edge. I think the challenge that we face is that organizations like Facebook and Apple and Amazon can iterate a lot faster than us. And so, if we could make user experience like a critical part of the way we build things, then we won't need to worry about it later on. Instead of sort of like, let's try and tack user experiences on afterwards, which seems to be the approach that we've ended up with.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But I guess the whole industry was built from a tech perspective.
100%, 100%.
And I wonder, when in that little earlier discussion, whether there isn't room for like a middle layer, so where you bring all the APIs together. And I don't think that it's the responsibility of the tech to combat scams. I think we have to. There must be another initiative to educate the community, and somehow a bit like your Uber, ranking your, what's that thing called, where you vote on the integrity of a service like Airbnb and Uber and whatever else.
Yeah, like the Better Business Bureau and Hello Peter and services like that.
Let's put that, onto another vertical or whatever it is. And then there might be a middle layer that brings together. And so when something comes out, that product or that initiative supplies something to what you suggested, which may be a library. And then any other products can build on top of that library or that whatever tech that is a useful interface. I think there's a company called Glue that does it for payments. And it would be a similar thing for crypto. Anyway, back to the questions. Are many consumers using crypto, or is it mainly traders and hodlers? Is this because of poor usability?
So that's a really interesting question, and I think it depends on where you're looking. If you're looking in sort of first world countries, if you're looking at Europe, if you're looking at portions of Asia, if you're looking at North America, I think the largest percentage there are hodlers and traders. People that are wanting price exposure, people that want to get rich. If you look in places like Venezuela and Zimbabwe, a lot of the people who are touching crypto there are touching it because they genuinely need it, because they can't operate without it. And so I think we've created like this weird paradigm, and privacy technology is exactly the same. Who uses privacy enhancing technology? Well, criminals use it, that's true, but so do like dissidents, and so do people who just don't want other people snooping on what they're talking about. So like every technology tends to create a bit of a split between people who are using it for what we might think are morally reprehensible reasons, or we might think that it's like, those people are ruining it for the rest of us. Those hodlers and traders and speculators, they're ruining it for everyone else. But it's the other people that we actually care about. It's the people who genuinely have a need. The people who, like, if you speak to them, they will tell you that crypto has saved their life. Those are the people that we should be caring about.
Yeah, there's another question on that about Africa, which was what kinds of reasons will encourage consumers to get involved across Africa? If they have a need, they are more lucky to go for it, or more likely to go for it. So
100%.
We're a bit of a Venezuela kind of, that's probably if I think about our payments business, these Nigerians and Kenyans, they are so adept on their phones. They've got such issues with moving money around that, there's a whole underworld of crypto, even though it's not legal in many instances, but they're really using it to shift money around and for remittances and things. So I just wonder, do you have a view on what might kind of be some drivers? I know, it's not easy to understand the dynamics of the African market. I don't think anybody gets that, but do you have a view on that?
So look, it's the obvious low-hanging fruit is like, the government's collapsing, and so we're moving into crypto. Like, that's the Venezuelan model, right? And it happened in Zimbabwe, but they fled into US dollars because crypto wasn't enough of a thing, or wasn't a thing at all at the time. I think like that to me is not ideal. It shouldn't be like, the way we're going to get the next billion users is by having every government in the world collapse. That just doesn't seem like a great attraction. So I think that there's obviously, like, for some people, self-sovereignty is a big thing, and they want to make sure that they not that they don't want to be regulated, but they want their money to be theirs. They want to have control over their money. They don't want anyone to be able to take it away from them, and they don't want to ask anyone's permission when they want to spend their money. And so there's a class of people that crypto appeals to, and I think there's a class of people who don't realize that they need crypto yet or want crypto yet. Gold bugs are a classic example of this. They they've got gold and silver because they don't want it to be easy to confiscate their wealth. And some of them, obviously, over the years have migrated some of that to crypto, but I think there are still more that will flock. But I think in terms of end users, in terms of users who are maybe not driven by that, at least not yet, the thing that might appeal to them that we should continuously consider is how to reduce their costs, because crypto does cut out a lot of the
Good
middlemen.
idea.
And I think crypto PSPs are a great example of this. Crypto PSPs like BitPay and coin payments are fantastic, and Globee are fantastic and essential, and their fees aren't even that terrible because they don't have to worry about fraud. So that from that perspective, it's great. However, a lot of services and companies out there that previously might have used BitPay have now moved to things like BTC Pay Server, where they're basically just accepting the funds natively, and their costs are nothing. There's no the overhead is like bare minimum, and they pay nothing to receive those funds. So I think like there is an example of where the future might actually go, and there might be this whole disintermediation of PSPs because of products like BTC Pay Server, and it's not the only one out there. There are others. So I look at it from that perspective. It's not necessarily a direct cost saving, like, oh, using Bitcoin is cheaper than using a credit card. It's not. I think that comparison gets made a lot, and it's the wrong comparison. I think the comparison should be, oh, storing your money in Bitcoin is cheaper than storing your money in the bank in countries that have negative interest rates. Think about that. Oh, the bank can take 5% of my money, or I can store it in Bitcoin and no one can take 5% of my money. There's a very real cost saving, and it's not by cutting out any middleman. It's just disintermediation in another way that has led to cost saving.
Yes, yeah, that makes sense, because I know not everybody has an opportunity to store their wealth in dollars, for example, which would have been a really good hedge. I mean, if we take where we live, the rand has depreciated considerably versus the dollar, but not everybody has that possibility. And crypto is actually quite a lot more accessible now than a dollar is to the general public. So I just wonder, as these fiat start to unravel, and as people start to realize, I don't think people realize because they don't move out of their jurisdiction. So I don't think we quite notice that the rand that we had 5 or 10 years ago is buying 60% of what it was buying before. So, and yet to get to a dollar is quite hard, and particularly as a South African, because is it illegal? It's not cool to have dollars here unless you have permission from somebody. So with crypto, that could be quite a nice avenue as people wake up to the fact that the naira, the Kenyan shilling, the ZAR are depreciating at a consistent rate, and possibly haven't finished doing that. I mean, we don't know where the dollar's going either. So, that's a double-edged sword in terms of if the dollar collapses on us. But it could well encourage people to go down that road, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
You good on that one? And Tate came up with another one, which what do you think about the latest KuCoin hack, and how do you think centralized exchanges need to improve their security to avoid more similar events? And initially I thought it was a bit off topic, but then with the BitMEX arrest situation that happened yesterday or whenever it was, and your passion for privacy and Monero and everything else, I thought that might be a little segue for you into a conversation around those two topics.
Yeah, 100%. I think KuCoin's an interesting one because I feel like they could have done better. And that's not to say that their security was terrible, but frankly, if you think about the amount of money that they had in those hot wallets, I mean, that is just embarrassingly bad. And I think that they really genuinely could have done significantly better. So with a lot of this stuff, it's 2020. We have had nearly a decade of cryptocurrency exchange hacks, like going all the way back to Mt. Gox. And I think it's pretty embarrassing that at this point in time, there hasn't been this realization amongst exchanges that, hey, we actually need to seriously consider the amount of money we have available in our hot wallets. And maybe, like, in my mind, the way I play this out to give credit to an organization like KuCoin is maybe initially they were serious about this. Maybe initially they were like, okay, we don't want to have a lot of money available in the hot wallets. Like, things can go wrong there. So what we're going to do is we're going to limit the amount of money that's in there, and we're only going to have like $100,000 at a time for all these different currencies that we support. And then you've got like, oh well, this big like Asian whale trader, like, oh man, when he pulls his money out, because he's doing arbitrage between KuCoin and Bittrex, and when he pulls his money out, he needs it out like instantly. Okay, cool. So now we need to have $500,000 available in Tether. And I think like maybe that's the way it went down. But my even if I play that out mentally, my argument is still like, if that is the case, if you do have customers, specific customers that have special needs, that have need some sort of special dispensation or special treatment, then why is it's not that difficult to just have like some sort of specific path for them. They go through a different wallet, a different set of controls, no problem. Like, the fact is, an attacker got into a very general system here and stole like nearly $200 million, which is a crazy, crazy amount of money to have available on hot wallets. And if that money was on cold wallets and they went and manually processed it, well, then that's on them. Then that's even more embarrassing than previously considered.
So from a usability perspective, it's to provide access in another area for your white label, your VIPs or whatever it is.
100%.
And keep it tight for your consumers. Yeah, because otherwise you're impacting on their usability again. Yeah. Next question 100%. From the audience is, how do you balance privacy and usability?
Yeah, so I think that there's a sort of tendency to view these two as different, right? It's like privacy somehow makes usability difficult, and in some cases it's true. And a classic example of this is Tor, right? So if you 5 years ago, if you used Tor, it typically for many people, they didn't just use the Tor browser. They would download Tor and run the Tor app, and then have a proxy, and then go set up this thing and set up the other thing, and that was really complex and really slow, and the experience was subpar. Nowadays, you download Tor browser, it auto updates, everything just works. It's fantastic. It's easy. You can surf the internet generally okay, as long as you're not like, if you need to log into services and you're doing it through Tor exit nodes, it's probably not a good idea. But generally, for like what 90% of the people use the internet for, Tor has just become a lovely experience. So I think. But I mean, and in fairness, it's taken over a decade to get there. So I do think that the two are not mutually incompatible. I think that there is a way to have a good user experience and still a private user experience. And an example of an organization that's done this quite well is Wire. They have this instant messaging app, which is very privacy focused, and I've managed to get my family and all of my staff on there, and we have no problem using Wire. There's no like, oh, this is confusing and whatever. Occasionally it's like, oh, I didn't get the push notification, but frankly, like, that happens with just about anything. But like, just in terms of the actual user experience, it's lovely. So I think you can still have privacy enhancing technology and still have a good user experience. We have examples of that today. We're lagging. We're lagging on the user experience side with Monero and Zcash. There's no doubt about that, but I think it's getting better.
Do you think like there's a way to choose levels of privacy, like in your usability? So as a consumer, I mean, I don't live in Europe, so I'm not under that legislation in terms of that consumer, whatever it is. And so it's kind of, can be chosen and dictated or ratcheted by the consumer as they're using something, using an application.
100%. I think the problem with an approach like that is you want to maximize privacy, which means that you probably need to have it needs to be private by default, and it needs to be strong privacy by default. And yes, they can ratchet out of it. Like, there's certainly ways to dial the privacy back for specific circumstances or for specific things, which is no different, frankly, to like using something like Wire for a private conversation and then going and posting a screenshot of it on Facebook. Like, there goes your privacy. So you can always back out of privacy, and it's impossible to prevent that, but strong privacy should be the default.
Cool. Okay, one last question. Do you think crypto is more usable in the background?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I've actually made that exact argument before, that I think that what we might end up with is like abstraction layers, similar to like if you swipe your credit card, you're not exposed at all to the settlement transaction between the merchant and the bank. And frankly, the merchant's not exposed to the complexity of that. The merchant doesn't like get a bag of cash dropped off. Exactly. So there's all sorts of magic that happens. In South Africa, there's like BankServe and all sorts of other organizations that are involved in that settlement transaction, but it's to the merchants, it's magic. And I think that maybe we might end up with something similar where, using Lightning or even layers built on top of Bitcoin that we haven't even thought about yet, we end up with like a user experience which is not dissimilar to today. It's tap your phone, tap a card, tap whatever, or and the payment just goes through, and ultimately it gets settled 30 days later, like in a Bitcoin transaction. But from the user's perspective and from the merchant's perspective, the money's gone. It's done. It's exchanged hands. The fact that settlement happens on chain at some later date as part of a bulk settlement, no one cares.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, I think that's about all we have time for today. So thank you very much, Rick. That was awesome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, very interactive, I haven't actually watched something that's given us that amount of insight into usability. I think, as you said, the industry's kind of avoiding mode or whatever it's called. I don't know. Everybody's talking adoption, but nobody's talking about, improving usability. So thank you very much. That was really awesome. And thank you to all our watchers and listeners and remote working and looking and whatever people. Thanks very much and have a fantastic day. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye.